He thought becoming a father would be the happiest moment of his life, until a single message on his wife's phone revealed a betrayal so deep it could only end in tragedy. A brother's deception, a wife's secret, and a decision that would shatter every bond he'd ever known. This is the story of how love, lies, and blood spilled in one weekend changed everything. This is True Crimes Altar, where every sin is punished, every betrayal has a cost, and every soul must answer to the truth. Like, comment, and subscribe, because these are the stories the guilty prayed would stay buried. Calvin Rhodes sat in a corner booth at Harper's Diner in downtown Brookford, slowly stirring his coffee as his eyes drifted toward the rain-smeared window. The early November sky hung low and heavy, a dull shade of gray that matched the knot twisting in his chest. Across from him, Harvey Trent, his closest friend since their high school days, studied him with growing concern. Calvin looked worn down, the faint shadows beneath his eyes and the loose fit of his suit telling a story Harvey had never seen before. Normally, Calvin, a sharp and well-put-together sales manager for medical equipment, kept himself crisp and collected. But today, he seemed like a man barely holding it together. "Harvey, I can't keep living like this," Calvin finally said, setting the mug down with a quiet thud. "These thoughts are eating me alive. I'm starting to think Tanya's seeing somebody else." Harvey's brow furrowed. In all the years he'd known Calvin, he'd never heard him speak with such defeat. "Are you sure, man? Maybe it's just the stress. You know how it is, expecting your first kid messes with your head." Calvin shook his head. "No, it's not just nerves. She's been different for months. She hides her phone the second I walk into a room, gets messages late at night, says it's work. But what kind of accountant gets text from coworkers at 10, 11 o'clock? Harvey leaned back, eyes narrowing as he took in his friend's tense posture. Calvin wasn't the type to leap to conclusions, and if he was talking like this, something real was going on. "And it's not just that," Calvin continued, his voice dropping. "She's gone cold. We barely talk. She used to tell me everything, and now it's like pulling teeth just to get a straight answer. And this didn't start with the pregnancy. It was way before. You try asking her about it?" "Plenty of times. She swears I'm imagining things. Says she loves me, that I'm making problems where there aren't any. But I'm not blind, Harv. I can see it." Calvin rubbed his hand over his face, and Harvey noticed the slight tremor in his fingers. It was worse than he thought. "And the part I can't get past?" Calvin's voice dropped to a near whisper. "I'm starting to wonder if the baby's even mine." Harvey's eyes widened. "Calvin, that's serious." "I know, but think about it. If she's with somebody else, how can I be sure? Timing fits, though, right?" "Fits, yeah, but that doesn't mean anything." Harvey sat silent for a while, weighing what he'd just heard. He'd worked in banking long enough to know how to assess a situation, but nothing about this was numbers on a spreadsheet. His friend was unraveling. "Listen," he said finally, "you need answers. You can't keep living like this, not with a baby on the way. Either it's real or it isn't, but it's better to know than to keep driving yourself crazy." "And how exactly do I find out?" "Start simple. Keep your eyes open. Ask around. If you get the chance, look through her phone. Maybe talk to the neighbors. You don't have to hire a PI just yet. Just be smart about it." For the first time in weeks, something like determination flickered in Calvin's eyes. "You're right. I need to know. One way or another." They left the diner, Harvey heading toward his office while Calvin made the slow drive back through the city. Harvey's words stayed with him. The not knowing was what hurt most, creeping into his thoughts in every quiet moment. By the time he reached his neighborhood, he'd decided to start small. Their neighbor, Marissa Cole, a 24-year-old nurse who worked shifts at a local clinic, was usually home during the day. Her windows faced his house, and if anyone had noticed anything out of place, it would be her. Pulling into his driveway, Calvin shut off the engine and crossed the street to her small cottage. Marissa answered almost as soon as he knocked, her hair pulled into a loose bun, wearing casual clothes. "Hey, Calvin. How's Tanya holding up?" She's getting ready for the big day, he said with a faint smile. Nervous, as you can imagine. Listen, I won't take much of your time, but I need to ask you something. She stepped aside to let him in, offering coffee, which he politely declined. What's going on? He hesitated, choosing his words. Lately, there have been odd things at our place. Stuff moved around, like someone's been inside when we're not home. Maybe I'm just on edge about the baby, but have you noticed anyone coming by? When I'm not there? Marissa frowned. Funny you should ask. I'm not nosy about my neighbors, but I have seen a man at your place a few times. Tall, darker skinned, around your age. Calvin's chest tightened. Can you describe him? Usually came in the afternoon when I know you were gone. Jeans, shirt, walked like he knew where he was going. Oh, drove a car like yours, just darker. That detail hit hard. His younger brother Darnell had the same model, only deep blue. Did he look familiar to you? Now that you mention it, yeah. Not exactly like you, but similar. Same kind of build, maybe the way he carried himself. Honestly, I thought he might be family. Calvin kept his voice steady. Could have been. Maybe Darnell was checking in on Tanya while I was out. Maybe. Anyway, let her know I'm thinking of her. Calvin thanked her and stepped back into the cool afternoon air. The image of Darnell at his house wouldn't leave him. It could be innocent, his brother helping out while he was busy. But paired with everything else, the picture forming in his mind was darker. He walked home slowly, the thought gnawing at him. Could his own brother betray him like that? Tanya was upstairs in the bedroom when he came in, folding baby clothes. She looked beautiful even now, tall and graceful, her short curls framing her tired but focused face. How's work? She asked without glancing up. Fine. You? Tired, but the doctor says everything's fine. Could be any day now. Calvin studied her, searching for something, guilt, fear, anything, but her movements were calm, practiced. Tanya, he said carefully, Darnell hasn't been around lately. Maybe we should invite him for dinner. She paused, just for a heartbeat, before resuming. Sure, if you want. But with the baby due any day, maybe we shouldn't plan much. He didn't stop by while I was out, did he? Her eyes flicked up, and for a second, something unreadable passed over her face. No. Why? Neighbor mentioned seeing someone familiar. Thought maybe it was him. Probably the mailman or delivery guy. You know how much baby stuff we've been getting. She turned back to her task, but her hands moved faster, more tense. Calvin noticed. The rest of the evening passed in quiet routine, but his mind was elsewhere, on Marissa's words, on Tanya's reaction. When she went to bed, he sat in the living room, thinking. Tomorrow, he'd go see Darnell face to face. Whatever the truth was, he needed to hear it from him. 3 days later, the chance came. Tanya left for a doctor's appointment that morning, and for the first time in months, she left her phone behind. Calvin's heart pounded as he picked it up. No lock. He scrolled through her messages, most of it innocent. But near the bottom, a contact named Jay stopped him cold. The messages dated back months, full of longing and plans to meet. I miss you. When can we see each other? Calvin's working late. Come over at 7. I can't wait for us to be together openly. We'll tell him after the baby's born. And then the one that crushed him completely. Are you sure it's yours? The timing's right. It's my son. His hand shook. Jay was Darnell. One message mentioned the rail yard, exactly where Darnell worked. They'd even discussed what to do if Calvin asked for a paternity test. He took photos of the messages, then searched the house, finding receipts from restaurants he'd never visited, lingerie he'd never seen her wear. Every piece of evidence landed like a blow. By noon, he couldn't bear to stay there. He drove straight to the South Line rail yard, rehearsing what he'd say. Darnell was under a locomotive, hands covered in grease. Calvin? Something wrong with Tanya? She's fine. We need to talk. In his car, away from others, Calvin asked, You having an affair with my wife? Darnell looked stunned. What? No, Tanya's like a sister to me. Then why were you at my house when I wasn't home? Darnell admitted he'd stopped by to help with the nursery, never thinking it needed to be mentioned. He swore there was nothing more between them. Calvin wanted to believe him, but the messages told a different story, and he wasn't about to let it go. Calvin left the rail yard more conflicted than when he'd arrived. Darnell's denial had sounded sincere, yet the words on Tanya's phone were burned into his mind. If Darnell wasn't lying, then who else could Jay be? Instead of going home, he turned toward Marissa's place again. She opened the door still in her scrubs, clearly just back from a shift. Calvin, is everything okay? Mind if I come in? I just don't feel like being home right now. Her expression softened and she stepped aside. Of course. Coffee? Sure. They settled in her small, warm living room, the sound of rain tapping the windows. Remember the guy you told me about at my place? He asked. Yeah. Can you remember anything else about him? Anything that really stood out? She thought for a moment, brows knit. About your height, maybe shorter, stockier build, short hair, and yes, a scar on his right arm. Big one. I saw it when he opened the car door. Calvin's pulse quickened. Darnell had that scar, a mark from when they were kids. Are you certain? Positive. I saw him more than once. Always when you weren't home. Stayed for hours. Walked in like he owned the place. The confirmation hit like a hammer. Darnell hadn't just lied. He'd lied straight to his face without blinking. Calvin, what is it? That man's my brother. And today, I found out he's been sleeping with my wife. Marissa's hand flew to her mouth. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Not your fault. You just told me the truth. He pulled out his phone and showed her the screenshots of the messages. She scanned them, shaking her head in disbelief. This is awful. How could they do this to you? I don't know. I confronted him an hour ago, and he swore nothing was going on. Now, I know that was a lie. What are you going to do? He rubbed his face, leaning forward. She's about to give birth, and now I'm thinking the baby isn't even mine. How am I supposed to live with that? Marissa laid a hand on his shoulder. You have to decide. Forgive and try to fix it, or what? Walk away from a pregnant woman and maybe my child? I don't know the right answer. But you can't live like this. You'll destroy yourself. They talked a little longer, but nothing she said lightened the weight in his chest. By evening, he knew he couldn't avoid home any longer. Tanya was in the kitchen when he walked in, stirring a pot on the stove. She smiled when she saw him. Hey, baby. How was work? I tried calling, but you didn't pick up. Busy day, he said, forcing a neutral tone. He could feel the wall between them, one she couldn't see. Over dinner, she spoke about her appointment, about how the baby could arrive any day. She smiled when she talked about the future, but to Calvin, every word was filtered through the betrayal. After she went to take a bath, he stepped out into the garden and called Harvey. Did you find out anything? Harvey asked. Yeah, worse than I thought. She's cheating with Darnell. Silence. Then, are you sure? Messages on her phone. Neighbors saw him at my place when I was gone. He lied to me this morning. Man, I don't even know what to say. They've even talked about the baby being his. Harvey let out a long breath. What are you gonna do? No idea. I can't explode now, not when she's days away from delivering. But how do I live like nothing's wrong? Maybe wait until after the baby comes. Then deal with it. And look at that baby wondering if he's mine. Talk to my brother knowing what he's done. I can't. You have to think clearly, Calvin. You've been hit hard, but one wrong move could ruin you completely. They've already ruined me. Harvey paused. Where are you? In the yard. She's upstairs. Come crash at my place tonight. Cool off. No. She'd know something's wrong. I'm not ready for that. Then rest. We'll talk tomorrow. Calvin agreed, though rest was the last thing he expected. He stood in the dark, staring at the wet grass, feeling like the ground under his life had split. By morning, everything had changed again. It was just after 6 when Calvin woke to soft groans from Tanya's side of the bed. She clutched her stomach, her breaths quick and shallow. Cal, I think it's time. Been feeling contractions for an hour. Instantly, his mind shifted into action. How far apart? About 7 minutes. Doctor said when it's 5, we go. He helped her to the bathroom, fetched the hospital bag they'd prepared, and guided her downstairs. We'll make it. The doctors will take care of you both. By 8, her contractions were 5 minutes apart, and he drove her to Easton General Hospital. The Saturday streets were nearly empty, and they arrived in 15 minutes. A nurse met them in the emergency area, paperwork already in hand. Tanya was taken to the maternity ward while Calvin stayed in the waiting area. It could be hours, the nurse told him. We'll keep you updated. He paced, tried to read, drank bad coffee, but his mind kept circling the same truth. The child might not be his, and the woman giving birth had been lying to him for months. Around noon, the nurse came back. She's in active labor. Everything's going well, but it'll be a while longer. Can I see her? Not yet. We'll call you when it's time. At 3 in the afternoon, she returned with a smile.
If you're enjoying this video, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. Share and like this video. It's free and won't cost anything, but it helps and encourages us to grow and do more. Thank you for your kindness, and back to the video.
Congratulations, Mr. Rhodes. You have a healthy baby boy. Weighs 7.5 pounds. Your wife is doing well. Calvin felt an ache that was both joy and bitterness. When can I see them? In about 90 minutes. We're moving them to the postpartum floor. He called Harvey to share the news, keeping his doubts to himself. At 4, a nurse led him down a bright hallway to a room at the far end. Tanya was propped in bed, exhausted but glowing. Beside her, in a clear crib, lay the baby wrapped in a blue blanket, asleep. Meet your son, she whispered. He looked down at the tiny face, searching for features he could place, but it was too soon to tell. He's beautiful, he said softly. Tanya talked about the smooth delivery, about names. She wanted to name him after Calvin's grandfather. He agreed, though his responses were short. You need to rest, he told her after a few minutes. I'll sit in the hall, then go grab some things from home. Did you call Darnell? He's been waiting to hear about his nephew. Calvin's jaw tightened. Not yet. I'll call him later. He stepped into the hall, the quiet broken only by the soft cries of newborns and the shuffle of nurses' shoes. He was still there an hour later when familiar footsteps approached. Darnell, smiling, holding flowers and chocolates. Congratulations, man. How's Tanya? How's my nephew? The word nephew scraped across Calvin's nerves. Let's talk by the window, he said flatly. They walked to the far end of the corridor, where large panes of glass overlooked the parking lot. Calvin turned to him, his voice low and sharp. Stop acting. I know. Know what? About you and Tanya. About you sneaking into my house. About you lying to my face. Darnell's expression faltered, but he tried to recover. You've got it wrong. I read your messages. Every word. He's my son. That's what you said. Darnell's shoulders dropped. I didn't want you to find out like this. Like what? By being lied to for the rest of my life? We were going to tell you after the birth. Tell me what? That my wife's having your child? That my own brother's been with her for months? Calvin, Calvin's hands fisted in Darnell's shirt, shoving him back against the glass. He's yours, isn't he? Darnell's eyes slid away. Most likely, yes. The timing, that was the breaking point. The rage, the humiliation, the grief, all of it crashed over Calvin at once. He shoved again, harder. Darnell stumbled, his back hitting the old window. The latch gave, the pane swinging open. Calvin, wait. One last push, and Darnell's body tipped through the frame, his shout cut short by a sickening thud 4 floors below. Calvin stood there, chest heaving, the cool air rushing in through the open window. Down in the lot, His brother's body lay twisted on the asphalt. The hall was silent. No one had seen. Closing the window, he walked calmly toward the elevator. When it reached the ground floor, he stepped out into the crisp evening air, heading toward the body. Blood was pooling slowly beneath it. A security guard hurried over. "What happened?" "I don't know," Calvin said, letting his voice shake. "I just came out and saw him here. Looks like he fell from up there." "You know him?" "He's my brother. He came to visit my wife. She just had our baby." The guard radioed for help, and soon the lot was swarming with medics and officers. An investigator suggested Darnell might have fainted near an open window. "We'll check the scene, but right now it looks like an accident." Calvin nodded, agreeing silently. Inside, relief and horror tangled. Darnell could never hurt him again, but Calvin had just killed his own blood. Once the officers finished their questions, he asked to go tell Tanya. Instead, he walked to his car, opened the glove compartment, and took out the revolver he'd bought last year for protection. He slipped it under his jacket and headed back inside. The fourth floor was quiet. Most staff gathered elsewhere, talking about the fall. He opened Tanya's door. She turned toward him immediately. "Rob, Cal, what was that outside? Sirens?" "Darnell's dead. Fell from the window." She sat up sharply. "What? How?" "He told me everything. About you. About the baby." Her face drained of color. "I can explain. Explain betraying me with my own brother." He pulled out the gun. "Calvin, think about the baby. That's not my baby. You said so yourself." She tried to swing her legs off the bed, but she was weak. "Please, let's talk. I know I made a mistake. A 6-month mistake?" His voice broke. She reached for him. "I love you. Always have." "Not enough to keep your hands off my brother." He raised the gun. She pressed her hands to her chest. "No." The shot echoed in the small room. Tanya collapsed back against the pillows, eyes wide, a crimson bloom spreading over her gown. She stared for a few seconds more, lips moving soundlessly, then stilled. Calvin looked toward the crib. The baby slept peacefully, untouched by the chaos. But Calvin knew every time he looked at him, he'd see Darnell. He turned, left the room, and sat on a bench in the hall, placing the gun beside him. In minutes, someone would find her. The police would come. He'd be arrested, tried, locked away. But as he sat there in the dim light, one thought consumed him. Everything he'd lived for, his love, his family, his future, was gone, destroyed by betrayal. And now, by his own hands, so was he. Calvin sat motionless on the bench, the weight of the revolver beside him pressing on his awareness like a stone. The corridor's soft hum, nurses at the far end, a muffled baby's cry from another room, felt far away, as though he were underwater. His mind kept replaying the last 30 minutes in sharp, jagged fragments, Darnell's eyes widening as the window gave way, Tanya's trembling hands pressed to her chest, the sound of his own breathing between those moments. He knew there was no way to undo what had been done. No way to rewind to a morning when he was just a man worrying about suspicions, when he still had the illusion of a life worth repairing. A door opened down the hall, and a nurse stepped out, clipboard in hand. She glanced his way but didn't stop, heading toward another room. Calvin's gaze drifted to the door of 407. Behind it lay Tanya's body, still warm, and the child that was his only by law. He wondered if anyone had gone in yet. Footsteps echoed in the distance, brisk and purposeful. The elevator doors slid open, and 2 uniformed officers stepped out, led by a hospital security guard. Calvin straightened slightly, his hands still in his lap. They passed without looking at him, heading for the nurse's station, voices low. His breathing slowed. Maybe he had a few more minutes before anyone connected him to what had happened upstairs. He could stand, walk out now, get in his car, and drive until the lights of Brookford were nothing but a dim smear in the rearview mirror. But where would he go? His pockets were nearly empty. His name would be on every bulletin within hours. Running wouldn't change the truth. He rose slowly, the revolver hanging loosely from one hand, and walked toward the window at the end of the hall. Outside, the hospital parking lot glistened from the rain, the reflection of street lamps stretching across its surface. A small cluster of people still stood where Darnell's body had been, the paramedics now covering it with a thick black tarp. Calvin pressed his forehead lightly to the glass. He remembered being 10 years old, running across a muddy lot with Darnell after school, laughing so hard they both tripped and went down together. He remembered the scar on Darnell's arm, the one from that same day. He remembered thinking they would always have each other, no matter what. That memory dissolved into the image of Darnell's face in the hospital hallway just before the push. Calvin turned from the glass and walked back toward Tanya's room. He pushed the door open, stepping inside. The baby still slept, tiny chest rising and falling under the blue blanket. Tanya's eyes stared at nothing, her features pale under the harsh light. The revolver felt heavier now. He set it gently on the edge of the crib, his fingers brushing the soft cotton of the blanket. For a moment, he just stood there, watching the small form shift slightly in sleep. Somewhere inside, a part of him wanted to pick the child up, to hold him, to believe there was something worth saving. But another part, louder, darker, reminded him of every word he had read, every detail Marissa had confirmed, every truth Darnell had admitted. He stepped back, turning toward the door. Voices rose in the hallway, hurried and clipped. A nurse's voice, an officer's. They were coming. Calvin glanced at the gun still lying on the crib. One final choice remained, and it would decide the rest of his life, or end it altogether. He reached for it just as the door burst open. The door swung wide, and two officers stepped in, one white, one black, hands near their holsters but not drawn. Behind them, a nurse froze in the doorway, eyes darting from Tanya's still form to the gun in Calvin's hand. "Sir, put the weapon down," the black officer said evenly, his gaze locked on Calvin's. Calvin's eyes flicked between them, his grip tightening. "It's over," he said, voice hoarse. "She's gone. He's gone. There's nothing left." "You don't have to make this worse," the other officer urged. "Step away from the crib. Hand me the gun." Calvin glanced at the baby one last time, the tiny bundle shifting in his sleep, unaware of the chaos swirling around him. "That's not my son," he murmured, barely audible, the weight of those words sinking into the air between them. "Maybe not by blood," the black officer said, "but you're the only father he's got right now. Don't let this be what he remembers." Calvin's breath came slow and heavy. The hallway behind them had filled. More nurses, a pair of hospital staff in blue scrubs, the security guard from earlier. The moment stretched, the only sound the low hum of fluorescent lights. Then, without a word, Calvin loosened his fingers and let the revolver drop to the floor. The clang was sharp in the small room. One officer stepped forward, kicking the gun out of reach, the other taking Calvin by the wrist to cuff him. He didn't resist. As they led him out past the onlookers, Calvin kept his head down, eyes fixed on the tiled floor. The same corridor that had seen him pacing hours ago, waiting for the birth of a child, now bore witness to his walk into the rest of his life, a life defined by 2 betrayals, 2 deaths, and a choice he could never take back. Outside, the cold night air hit his face, rain misting across his skin. Red and blue lights from the waiting patrol cars washed over him as the officers guided him into the back seat. Through the blurred window, he could see the hospital room, where the lights still burned, a dim outline of a crib near the window. The door shut, cutting off the view. The car pulled away, and for the first time since it all began, Calvin realized the truth. His story was no longer his to tell. It would be told in courtrooms, whispered in neighborhoods, dissected in headlines. But what really happened in that hallway, in that room, only he would ever truly know. And now, so do you. But the question is, if you were in Calvin's place with the same evidence, the same betrayal staring you in the face, what would you have done? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew.